Wonderful. So I'm here with Chris Lavoie and Brad Fitzgerald of Penobscot County. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
Of course. So we're here to talk about your non-emergency call diversion solution that was built on Amazon Connect, deployed and supported by Morse. So we're going to talk about the problems and challenges that you were facing, how you solved those problems, what your implementation experience is like, the outcomes that you've seen, and also we're going to talk about future state too, because Chris, I know you've got a vision for where you want to take your contact center into the future, leveraging some AI and other tools. So we'll talk about that as well. But first, I figured we could get started with your roles and responsibilities and what each of you do at Penobscot County. So Brad, if you'd like to start and introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
So I'm Brad Fitzgerald. I'm the Deputy Director of Penobscot County Regional Communications Center. My main role is the day-to-day operations of the center and deal with staffing, hiring, and just making sure that the operation and my staff has everything that they need, and work a lot with some of our technology needs and the changes that are coming forth from that.
Perfect. Chris?
Yes, I've been the director since 2018. I started as a dispatcher in 2011 and worked my way up through the ranks. Most recently, obviously, like Brad said, we've got some staffing difficulties like most 911 centers across the country. So coming up with a solution to allow the people that we have working have a better work-life experience with dealing with the increased calls and the decreased amount of people was huge for us.
Fantastic. So I'd like to dive into that a little bit more because that's one of the problems that you were facing, and one of the things that prompted you to look at new solutions was the staffing shortage. So let's start at the beginning of what initially prompted you to say, hey, we need a solution here. We're facing these problems. And then how did you start evaluating different solutions?
How this whole project came about was actually last year at the May NENA conference. One of our instructors, which hopefully he doesn't mind me name dropping him, is Jim Lake from Charleston County, South Carolina.
Okay.
So Jim came up and did a leadership class for us. And while I was talking with Jim, he had actually brought up that he had introduced AWS in the contact center into his dispatch center. And when he first started talking about it, I actually thought that would never work in Maine. But as I began to listen to him talk a little bit more, Brad and I had a discussion. I was like, this is what we need. So I think when you really think about the job that we do, using a contact center solution like AWS is fairly new to the business. I think last I knew, we were in the top 20 in the country that has stood up this solution for a 911 center. So it's not new technology for airlines, credit card companies, banks.
Right.
But it's new to us. So sort of trying to pave that way. It's been difficult, but I think it's been rewarding, and I think it's going to pay off dividends in the future. I think that the general public expects that when they call a bank or they call an airline that they're going to get a system like this. They don't expect it when they're going to call their local police department, which was one of the difficulties that we had faced when we first started. But I think as well as they're expecting that human element to answer the phone, they don't realize how much more work they've put on telecommunicators across the country. If you look 20 years ago, people didn't call about their neighbor's barking dog. They didn't call because their neighbor's trash ended up on their front yard, right?
Yep.
They went over and they talked to their neighbor about it, and then they went about their day. Now they're calling police departments, getting them to deal with these issues. And when the police departments deal with those issues, we're the ones that take those calls. So not only are we handling all the emergency calls that continue to increase every day, we're now handling more non-emergency calls. Fireworks complaints, animal problems, nuisance issues. They're not emergencies, right? So our staff is tied up dealing with those non-emergency complaints when they should be freed up to deal with emergency complaints. So when Brad and I started talking about that, I think that's when it really clicked that we may be able to divert some of our non-emergency calls to AWS.
Oh, absolutely. And it does a couple of things. One, it's a much better citizen experience because people who are calling in for true emergencies can get the help they need much faster because your skilled dispatchers aren't bogged down by, hey, my neighbor's trash is in my yard, or some of the non-emergency calls that could be handled by now an IVR bot, right? And then number two, you're a lot more efficient in your dispatch center. You're paying some of these dispatchers a good amount of money. They have certain skill sets to handle emergencies. So the last thing you want to do is pay them top dollar for their skill set just to be wasted, so to speak, on the non-emergency calls. So it's a win-win across the board for you, for the citizens of Penobscot County. And going back to the staffing shortage that you saw and still have, I know it's improved a little bit. Do you think a solution like this can augment staff? So it's not about replacing anyone, but it's more about, hey, I'm down 10 people, but now since I've got this AI bot handling non-emergency calls, I don't need to hire as many people, and therefore I'm seeing less of a staffing shortage. Do you think that is an outcome that you might see?
I think.
Go ahead, Brad.
I think, when we first started discussing this, 50% staffing level was like a good place for us.
Okay.
But if you notice across the country, call volume and everything went up. Staffing levels are down. But I think our employees, we still need the same amount of employees. We still have that because the call volume is still there. So whether we're still getting the phone call or that emergency call, there's still the other element that they're dealing with, with the dispatching side of it. So the call volume is increasing. So the workload is there. Definitely, we still need that human element. But to be able to take some of that burden for the non-emergent things would be our biggest benefit of it. Take some of that, stress of the workload of the phone ringing constantly, because as we reach the summer months, we, every month we're adding a new element to it. Soon we come up on the 4th of July celebrations and people want to know when parades are. And then, we will reach fireworks season. And then when we go into the winter months, when a road's going to be plowed and things like that, those types of calls that we've been dealing with for many years, like Chris had said, that have only increased because, we've always, we've pushed to the public. Just call your police department. Just call your police department. Just call your police department. They know the answers to everything. All those calls are now coming to us where they didn't. So just to be able to take some of that piece off of them, I don't think it will replace a human element. I think it's going to help the human element in their work environment, just taking a little bit of that stress off.
Oh, absolutely.
They're going to be able to perform better.
Yeah.
I think there's certainly a high stress level when you're dealing with 911 calls, especially serious 911 calls. But I think a lot of that stress is also added when you hang up the phone from that serious 911 call and you pick up the phone and it's someone with a very minor issue. And to that person, it's very important, right? Mm-hmm. But for that dispatcher that just handled, instructing someone how to do CPR on their child,
yeah,
it's a minor problem that they don't need to be screaming about, whether it's they're frustrated because their neighbor's cat's living under their porch,
yeah,
or someone's shooting off fireworks when they're following the state law. All that stuff happens today. So if we can divert those small, minor complaints and, even like Brad brought up fireworks, we just turn that on That's a new call flow that we just released a few weeks ago.
4th of July is right around the
Yep.
corner.
So we're going to start here in a couple weeks with Memorial Day weekend, right up until probably the week after the 4th of July. That's when our fireworks calls for service skyrocket. So, but being able to push that information out, not just handle the complaint, but actually push out information about the ordinances in their communities is huge. So the questions that our dispatchers would have answered, AI is now doing that for us.
Well, that's fantastic. And like you mentioned, it takes a lot of stress off of these dispatchers too. I mean, you can imagine, like you just alluded to, the dichotomy of when you just walked a parent through how to perform CPR to save their child's life, and then the next call, you've got somebody screaming at you furious because the neighbor's dog is in the yard, right? And so taking those calls off of them is definitely lowering the burden. And that's very important because in this industry, very high turnover. In fact, Indeed.com ran a study almost a year ago, and emergency call centers, or the profession of a dispatcher, is one of the top 10 in the nation for turnover because the job is so stressful. And so deploying something like this AI solution is helping you not only become more efficient and helping your citizens out with a better, faster experience, but it's reducing stress for your dispatchers, and in turn, that should lower turnover, which that's a big cost savings for you guys, because Brad, you and I were just talking before we started recording here that turnover is an issue and it's expensive for you to hire, to train, and you go do that, and then 3 months in, somebody thinks it's too stressful. Now you're back at square one, spending all that money again. So could you talk a little bit about how the solution has helped with turnover, helped with costs, and also how you see that benefiting your costs in the future as well when it comes to hiring?
Yeah, so I think one thing when we first started talking about that we kind of forgot to mention is, we talked about finding ways to even do some sort of online reporting, which we've never done. And then, we kind of come across a solution and ways to point things together. And then when we brought it to our staff, at first we got it'll never work because we've never done that here.
Yeah.
It'll be different. And now I've seen with a lot of our staff, now that they've, seen the solution and it's been changed and it's been in play, and we've made some tweaks to kind of get more use of it. Now they're coming to us saying, that they're seeing it, or, hey, we think we could capture more of this, and they want to grow with it, when there was that hesitation at first. And I think it was the same with some of our public safety end users. When we even talked about this, we kind of got the same thing, like, oh, it'll never work. And then when they start to see the implementation a little bit. So I think over time, like you'd mentioned, is it will help with that turnover, because we're taking, just even if you can take little pieces of that stress away from them, that little bit of workload, because every dispatcher there, they might not say it, but they're there because they want to deal with the emergencies. That's why they do this job. And we've seen it in our staff every day, is they thrive when the big incidents happen. So if you can take these little things away that are just adding undue, call volume to them, and let them deal with what they're trained at and what, they're best at, and when they work best as a team, it'll be huge. And I think it will make a big difference in our recruiting and our retention over time because of it.
Well, that's phenomenal to hear. And you bring up an interesting point as well from the constituent side of things. I think the general perception is that I want to talk to a human no matter what, and I want to talk to a human right away. And I think a lot of that is due to, up until recently, some of these IVR bots haven't been the most sophisticated, and they're very easy to confuse. I think we've all been there where we're screaming into the phone, talk to an agent, I want to talk to a real person, because the bot just doesn't seem to understand your problem. But I think you can break that barrier once somebody has an experience where they call in for a non-emergency. Maybe it's just, hey, where are the fireworks happening and when? and they get their answer within 15 seconds. They don't have to wait on hold. The bot can understand their question and also communicate in a more natural language type of way, much better than even 5 years ago. All it takes is one time for a customer or a constituent to have that experience, for them to go, okay, maybe I don't need to talk to a human every time. That was kind of nice not waiting on hold and getting my answer in 15 seconds.
Right, because we can program it to say whatever we're going to say, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they get their answer quicker, and they're going to get the same answer. So that's what's nice about it, is we can program it to say what we would say to people. And I think that's a common misconception that the public has.
So how do you think, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Chris, with this question, but how do you think that public perception changes? Is it just about they need to call in and get that experience to understand, okay, this is a lot better than it used to be, I'm okay with this? Or is there some sort of outbound communication that needs to go out to the public about this new solution? How do you change that perception?
When we first started this process, I think it was even before we started working with Morse, but I had done some PR stuff and we did some stuff on the news.
Okay.
And I got absolutely roasted.
Really?
Yeah.
By who?
By the general public. Yeah.
Crucified.
It wasn't of course, with a news interview, right? They chop up what you want to say.
Right, of course.
And it changes the message. So it wasn't until I got a section on a local radio station early in the morning, and that we started getting some buy-in from the public, and people started realizing why we were doing this. And I think if the general public understands that I want my staff to be available when you have the worst moment of your life, and I want this other system to handle the minor stuff that goes on. It's still stuff that needs to be handled, right? But it's minor. And I think once they understand that, they realize that this is a good move for us. Since when did we turn this on? December? I think.
Yeah, about then.
December?
Yeah.
Right around Christmas?
About 5-6 months ago.
I've gotten 0 complaints.
Wow. That's impressive.
I think one thing
testimony.
that I translated to when people asked about it is something as simple as ordering a pizza.
Okay.
Who calls a pizza shop anymore and orders it?
Not many.
Nobody.
I use a mobile app every time.
Everybody goes online and does it online. Everything is, in your hands by your cell phones now. Or so how are we any different? Like, yes, there's always going to be the human element to our job, but as Chris said, there are pieces of it that we can get some help with. No different than a pizza shop. When somebody calls to want to order a pizza and it's a Friday night and everybody's ordering pizza because it's rainy out, they need some help with it. So why do you think a lot of these places went to other forms of technology to help, mitigate, some of that on their own staff? Because you've seen it when you go into these fast food places and they're, putting a meal together and the phone rings and they stop what they're doing. They had to go answer a phone. It's no different than an emergency dispatcher. If you can give them that piece to help them focus on their primary mission, and that other piece will take care of, the other part of it, makes everybody's lives easier.
Oh, it absolutely does.
So that was,
well said.
one of the ways that I kind of, and when you explain that to some people, because everybody now has used the online ordering app, whereas they might not have used an AWS system to speak to an emergency dispatch center. But when you can give them that sort of comparison to something that they've done and used on the daily, it helps, for them to have that better understanding of it. So I think a lot of it, like Chris said, we did some public education, but it's going to take, public education, and in turn, when some people get use of it, to say, yeah, geez, I called and I didn't have any issues. And that'll be, that'll take some time, but we're starting to get there. We're slowly, in some of the things that we've implemented, like I've been surprised. like the way that AWS works with like our online reporting system, we've gotten videos sent to us of things that I didn't think that, and that was right off in the beginning that I said, this will never happen. And it did very quickly because, we gave them that tool to like order their pizza on their cell phone, and that's today's generation. So they were able to provide more information than we ever had before.
Yeah, I think we're 2 days in when that happened.
Really?
2 days after we flipped the switch, we were getting pictures and video messages of when we started with animal complaints. That was the first thing we started with.
And that provides a lot more context than somebody explaining something over the phone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like you said, with this new generation, that's how they want to communicate and convey their message. They want to be able to send you a picture or a video in real time.
And they want to do it from their cell phone.
Yeah, right there.
They want the ease. Nobody wants to really talk on a phone anymore. If they can go onto get connected to an app. And, that was one of the things when we first turned this on, when they were talking, we were even doing the build phase and talking about it, and they said, oh, yeah, we can send a text message and right to them, and it's instant. I was skeptical, but it is. I've done it many times, when we were testing and trial this, and it is that quick. And I think that, like I said, when the public, and especially this generation, the cell phone generation, we have this technology generation, they're going to use it more.
Well, absolutely.
I'm going to order pizza from a place that has a better pizza app because it's easier to use.
Yeah, user experience. So you guys are omni-channel then. You've got the text channel turned on.
Yep.
And that clearly is working very well for you. Do you find on the non-emergency line that more people are using text versus calling in, or is it 50-50 or more in favor of the calls right now?
I would say that so we've been working on developing our call flow.
Okay.
Which I'm sure, as you know, is difficult when you're in the first 20 in the country to stand this up in our profession. So as we work on developing that call flow, it gets better every single time we make an update. But I don't think we're capturing as much as we want to right now, but we're working towards that. I'm not disappointed in the results that we've had so far. More so, I'm ready to go after more. I think that we can make a huge difference. At first, I was thinking that I'd be happy if we handled somewhere between 15 to 20% of our calls. Now I'm thinking we could do somewhere between 30 or 40, probably by the end of the year.
That's a big jump, double. And I appreciate your transparency. I think that's important to note for anyone listening to this that is considering a solution like this, that it's not perfect day one. There's going to be iterations, continuous improvement. That's why you work with people like Morris to help you continuously improve and get to those outcomes of 40% call diversion, right? But it can be a process. It sounds like you saw results right away and there hasn't been any complaints since you turned it on, which is fantastic. But it is a commitment. It does take some time, and you have to be committed to wanting to improve it over time.
Right. And I don't think we had the expectation that it was going to be the flip of a switch and we were just going to see these drastic changes overnight. When Brad and I started talking about this, we actually wanted to do this slow and methodical. We didn't want this to fall flat on its face, because I think when you do something like this and you make a change to the industry, if you don't do it right the first time, it's never going to fly. So we had to make sure that what we were doing was going to work for the future. And by taking a slower, methodical approach and working through, just animal complaints and leaving that up, and what did we leave that running for? 4 or 5 months before we made a switch. So by sticking to that, right, and then bringing on fireworks, and then next time will probably be informational complaints or welfare checks. And once we make that call flow, we'll make a different one. By doing that, I think it's better for the public because they get used to it. They get to call in and they get to go through at least part of a call flow right now. But they start getting used to it. And then you develop a little bit of buy-in with them. But it also allows you to make checks and balances within your own system to make sure that you're doing the right things, to make sure that all the calls still get processed.
And I think in addition to that, as we, just with the animal complaints, we changed the call flow just a couple times because we ran it for a couple weeks, and in working with Morse, they found better verbiage that we could use to help capture a little more. So we'd make a change and then we'd run it and say, oh, that did work. So we were learning from ourselves, and with the help of Morse, and that's been a big piece of it. Is it's not just us trying to figure this out on our own, is to have that help, but learning, seeing what worked, making a tweak, so that when you add another element to it, you're not learning all over again, or you're not putting so much in at once. You're kind of learning as you go and finding every element you add. You've learned some tips and tricks, apply it to that next element. And then when you can go to that next element, you've learned from 2 elements. So now the third one's just as, better. And I think that's, as we continue to grow, it's only going to get better and better because we're going to have learned all these things along the way, instead of trying to build the system, turning the whole system on live at once. And like he said, then when it fails, well, now what do you do? We took it one piece at a time so we can grow from that, just keep adding building blocks to that piece. And I think in the end, it will make it so much better for us and the public, because it's going to be built, a more robust system, because we've learned and changed and adapted the whole way through the process.
Well, I think that's a great point. And for anyone, again, listening to this, that's amazing advice, taking an incremental, methodical approach, especially given your industry, how this is new. You guys are early adopters of this type of technology for dispatching centers, PSAPs. Why do you think that is? So you mentioned, Chris, earlier, going back to the beginning of our conversation, this isn't necessarily new for airlines or hotels or retail. Banking especially has adopted this for quite some time. But PSAPs and emergency centers are just starting to get into this type of technology. Why do you think it's taken them so long?
So I think that the public perception, right? Most of the U.S. is still small town USA, right?
Yep.
So we still run into it where, someone will call from a small town in Penobscot County, and they think they're calling their local police or fire department, right? But it's coming to us because that police and fire department doesn't have the person at the front desk to answer the phone anymore, because even they can't hire people. So public safety in general is usually very reactive and not very proactive. So I think that all of public safety truly is at a breaking point with staffing levels. It's something that we've seen across the country, not just in dispatch, but police, fire, EMS. And I think that while they maybe are proactive in certain aspects of their job, we're not necessarily as proactive with the way we've always done things.
Okay.
That usually gets in the way, right?
Yep.
So this is very new. But I also think that, when we signed up to do this job, we signed up to help people and talk to people, help them through the worst moments of their lives. And I think the public still expects that when they call, that they're going to talk to a human. So I honestly think that within 5 or 10 years, this is the way of the future.
It'll be commonplace.
It'll be a commonplace across the country.
Yeah.
I bet every dispatch center will have some sort of call processing solution in their center, because the calls for service continue to increase everywhere, and the amount of people that we have walking through the door to come to work decreases fewer and fewer every year.
And that trend is continuing.
Absolutely.
As you've seen, and probably won't change anytime soon, if ever.
If you look at, I've been with the county for 16 years, started as a dispatcher, and our staffing levels, budgeted staffing levels are not much more now than they were 16 years ago. But our call volume now compared to 16 years ago is not even in the same ballpark.
Wow.
It's skyrocketed. And that's just taking our dispatch center as one example. But I bet if you polled most public safety agencies in this state and asked what their staffing levels are now compared to what they were 15 years ago, you're going to see there hasn't been much change. There hasn't been large increases in staff, but I bet every single one of them is going to tell you that their workload's gone up. So that's what nobody, has seen is how, workload has increased for everybody, but we haven't increased people with it. So again, it puts us on us to find solutions. How do you deal with that? And I think, when he said this will become more commonplace in 5 to 10 years, well, it's already started, is that because everybody now knows most customer service companies you call, that's what you're not going to talk to a live person. Or if you do, it's going to be a while before you do because we're going to bring you through some steps first. So I think the public is already getting acclimated to that. So I don't think it will be a huge, drastic change in 5 years when public safety takes a piece of that as well.
I like that. You bring up so many interesting points, and going back to what you were saying, Chris, at the end of the day, this is about helping people. And that's why dispatchers signed up for this job. And that's why I love this use case so much, is because it's different from your average. And nothing wrong with these other contact center outcomes and use cases, but a lot of times it's cost savings or better customer service, which is fantastic, of course. And I do love that as well. But this comes down to actually helping people, sometimes even saving lives. Like you mentioned earlier, the CPR example. And there's a serious problem around the country with public safety hitting a breaking point. Like you said, how do we solve for those issues? This technology solution can fix that, and it's desperately needed right now, as you two have been talking about this whole time. So my hope is that as places like Penobscot prove out this technology and how beneficial it is to the constituents of your county, to your dispatchers, to everyone working there, that it'll become more commonplace and more widely adopted amongst other counties. Do you think that's what's going to do it? Is it, early adopters like you proving this out? Is it the messaging to the public? You gave that example earlier, Chris, of getting roasted because the news maybe portrayed your message in a way that you didn't want it to. But once you're able to get your message out clearly to the public, they said, okay, now I get it. Now I understand. The pizza example, we use this kind of technology for everything else. Why not a dispatch center, right? So do you think, does it come down to public messaging and changing the perception? Is that how we get more wide adoption of this technology? What's it going to take?
I think public messaging is huge, especially for anyone that's thinking about going down this road. Get the message out early and what your goals are, right? But I think what it's going to take is it's going to take several centers having successful use cases to get other people on board with doing this. At the end of the day, I think that most of us, when you're comfortable, right? It's easy to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So most places are comfortable doing business the way they've always done it. I think that we need to be comfortable with change too, and we cannot continue down this road. So the public deserves the best service that they can get, and if our people are tied up dealing with nuisance complaints when they could be dealing with a burglary, a house fire, a CPR call, a childbirth, they need to be available for those complaints.
And I think one thing that public safety is really good at are being copycats.
Okay.
So
that's a good thing in this case.
Right. So I think when you're talking about this solution, if you have some public safety agencies that use it and make it work, and we can show that, someone else is going to start to use it, because that's always what we've done, all across public safety. We share each other's best practices with a lot of things, and we make it our own. We might have to tweak it a little bit to make it work, for our area or our town or whatever. But we've always done that across, this whole nation, is copied what works best for everybody, and then we build upon it.
We did it. We didn't come up with this idea.
No.
This was just a casual conversation at a conference between a few of us that I didn't even know that this was even an option, right? But I think when you get those people together who want to move the profession forward and are looking out for the best interest of the public and the employees, the job gets better, right? So this wasn't anything we came up with, and certainly won't be the last. I know that since December, I've gotten probably a dozen phone calls from places all over the country asking questions about AWS and how our processing works and what successes we've seen so far. So people that I never would have talked to before, this has allowed me to chat with them. And we've taken ideas from other centers, and we've given ideas. So it's been interesting, that's for sure.
I bet. And that's amazing to hear. And I know you two gentlemen are humble enough to maybe not call yourselves pioneers in this, but I would. You said one of the first 20 dispatch centers in the whole country to adopt this sort of technology. To me, that's being a pioneer, and it's something, like I alluded to a few minutes ago, it's desperately needed. So we need somebody to take the plunge. And ultimately, imagine almost every county, every city being on a solution like this. It will help people all across America. It's going to help the general public in times of dire emergency. And the fact of the matter is, it could be life or death. That's what we're dealing with here. The difference between somebody getting to a dispatcher right away to walk me through how to perform CPR on my child, or how to stop blood rushing out of somebody's arm. I need those answers right away, because a couple minutes is life or death. And if I can't get access to that person because they're tied up with a non-emergency call, that's very, very bad. We could change that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is amazing. And it's at a time, like you said, where public safety is at a breaking point, and there needs to be innovative solutions to help people. The staffing shortage issue probably won't change anytime soon. And we have the technology to help people, so why not do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes years to feel comfortable to come into work as a new dispatcher, right? Yeah. But to make it through the training process, it's almost a year. From the time they interview to the time they're on their own, it's almost a year.
Wow. They got to go through the polygraph tests and the background checks and the training. Yep.
So it's an extensive hiring process, and then the training is extensive as well. So by the time they get signed off, I mean, we won't see the effects of
staffing changes
for years.
And then in that time, you can almost guarantee you'll have another departure. Something will change. So it's always changing. It's always evolving, and we're always, scrambling to make changes to coverage and schedules to try and cover the workload that we have. Whereas, if we could have another solution to help with that, it would make it even more simpler.
Well, exactly. To what we were talking about earlier. Hiring new people, that is a serious investment for your county, with time, with money, with resources. So how do we lower turnover? And one of those ways might be kind of what you're thinking for your future state, Chris, is leveraging more AI to improve the dispatcher experience, dispatcher empowerment. How do we make their jobs easier? How do we leverage AI to put information in front of them real time to help a caller in their situation. Maybe it's a process that as a dispatcher I'm not familiar with, but because the AI is monitoring the call in real time, it's feeding me the answers, it's walking me through the next best actions that I can take with the caller, or post-call summarization, analytics, how effective are we at helping people through emergencies, what's the success rate? There's so much more that you could be doing. You're off to an amazing start, but I know you have a vision for where you want to take the contact center in the future as well. So if you wouldn't mind, Chris and Brad, spending a few minutes on what your future vision is like, I think that would be impactful as well.
I know that there's a handful of options out there, right? Talking with other centers and what they're doing now, and are working towards in the future. I can't say that I have one path drawn out, because there's so many different options. We could go 100 different ways. But obviously, where we are today, we only have two flows up and running. Increasing the amount of flows, increasing the amount of traffic that's captured by the bot and calls that are handled. Not so much on the AWS side, but what we're working on now is porting the calls in from online reporting. So right now, if you call our non-emergency line and you want to file a fireworks complaint or an animal complaint, it's going to send you to that online reporting system. You fill it out right on your phone, and then it pops up on the screen in dispatch. Well, while we're saving the time on the phone with the caller, the dispatcher is still having to intake that information out of one program and put it into another. So it's not saving us a lot of time there. So coming up with a port, basically, to capture that data from the online reporting system and automatically upload it into our CAD system is probably going to be one of the next steps that we're looking at, hopefully by the end of the year. And then at that point, we'll probably be able to increase the amount of traffic that gets diverted to AWS. I'm going to say probably 4 or 5 times what it is today.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So that's going to be step one, right? I know there are other dispatch centers out there that are actually using, and I'm not a technical person by any stretch, so they're using stuff like ChatGPT, and they're using Microsoft Teams as well. And they are sending some of their dispatchers home, and they're using AI and ChatGPT and Microsoft Teams to handle importing of non-emergency calls from home. I'm not going to say we're ever going to get there, but it's definitely something that needs to be explored, not just in Penobscot County, but across the country, right?
Absolutely.
I think that the pandemic did a lot of things, and if it showed the world anything, it was that you're comfortable working from home.
Yeah.
And that's something that needs to be looked at in the future. It really does.
I completely agree. And that would help with hiring as well, because a lot of people won't even consider a job not working from home anymore. So how do you offer that to people? And if you can't right now, that's a huge talent pool that you're missing out on, that you can't recruit from because you don't offer a work from home solution. The solution's out there, it sounds like. It's just about implementing it.
Right.
And that could be a game changer for PSAPs all over the country, like you said.
Yep. And there's so many different aspects of our job that would be difficult to bring home.
Yeah.
But I think that we need to be innovative in how we proceed in the future. And, even if it's a rotation or something that allows, half the staff to work remote and then they switch, it's something that needs to be looked into. Because honestly, what we're hearing during the hiring process is work from home. or they only want to work Monday through Friday 8 to 5. And we don't close. We're
24/7,
We're open
365.
24/7, 365. So
Emergencies never stop.
no, they do not.
And emergencies don't, pick business hours either. So
Yeah, right.
But so I do think that even you could take that small element and give a chance to change a little bit of our staff, a little bit of the workforce, and that would be huge because you could tap in, like you were saying, a different market of employees. And I think a lot of the technology is there. I mean, there were other things that we, learned at the conference last week of different technology that's out there that for our radio system that we never knew you could implement and use from a computer from home. So, I mean, obviously, like you said, our dispatchers are multifaceted in what they do, but each part of the industry is starting to seem to make different changes in their technology. And you start to put a lot of these pieces together. It's now a complete game changer for everything.
Absolutely. So, shifting gears a little bit, what advice would you have to another dispatch center or another PSAP that is facing the same problems you are that we've been talking about, that are starting to think there's got to be a better way? What advice do you have for helping them find a solution, evaluate it, implement it? What lessons have you learned along the way? If I was a deputy director over at the city of Portland, for example, and I came to you, Chris, how do I do this? And how can I be successful implementing this type of technology for my constituents? What are some of the things that you would tell them?
So, starting off, I think that obviously we've already hashed this out, but educating the public is huge. That's step one. The why, right? Mm-hmm. They need to know why you're doing this. And I think that once they understand the why, anyone is going to understand that this is a good move, right? When you tell someone that I do not want my employee who I'm paying to be here as a 911 dispatcher handling a lost cat complaint, or a why isn't my road plowed yet, or when is my power going to come back on? They want them there to handle emergencies, right? And anyone's going to understand that. So that'd be step one.
Okay.
Step two, unless you have a very, very, very well-versed IT department that already has knowledge of AWS, find a partner. We would be taking in 0% of our calls today if it wasn't for Morse. So, the partnership that we've had has been phenomenal. Anytime I reach out with questions, it's a quick response, and it seems to be day or night, I would say. The customer service there is excellent. So great. Find a partner to work with you, and then don't get discouraged, right? So even if someone's starting or thinking about starting this in the next 6 months, there's still going to be, like you said, a pioneer in this profession, because there's thousands of dispatch centers across the country, and I don't think we're spooling them up that fast, right?
Yeah.
So don't get discouraged. Don't be afraid to make changes. That was something that, I don't know how many meetings that, your poor staff, really, in some of those meetings. Brad and I would come up with an idea and we'd change it 10 times, and then we'd finally come to an answer, and we would implement it, and then we'd contact them and we'd change it again. And it's all about finding what works for you, right? And, what's been difficult for us is the way we word things in the Northeast is a lot different than the way they word things in the South.
Yep.
So Most of the places that have done this are in the southern or western part of the country. So switching up some of those call flows and how things are worded and making sure that it fits your area and fits your department is crucial.
That's a great point too.
And have a plan. Like we discussed many times today, is we had a plan to take it one flow at a time, one complaint at a time, one step at a time. And I think that's a big part of the success, is knowing what your plan and your vision is and just taking it step by step, working there, not just saying, well, I'm going to have the solution, I'm going to correct it all overnight, because that's not going to happen. So to have and lay out the plan going forward, kind of like we had done. So you have something to look back on and track your own progress. And I think that's a big piece of it too.
Okay. It's another great point.
And the help, like
Yeah.
you said, like we're not tech gurus. We would have been nowhere close to where we are now without a partner to help us along the
good.
way.
When we started, when we went through the training process, and they had us build in some of the call flows, I felt bad for them.
Yeah.
It's a process. Yeah. But that's our jobs, right? We know that going in.
Yeah. But it was fun.
To be expected. Yeah. Oh, good. At least you had fun. I'm sure
I think
we
they
did
had
too.
fun with us too.
Yeah, I bet. I'll have to ask them when I get back after this. Get the real scoop.
Yeah. I mean, they would probably give him some good comical relief with. But I mean, in all honesty, though, that's with something new like this, is you need to have that help. You need to have those people that are versed in that, or we're not going to succeed with it. And I think we know that this can be a good solution. So we need to find ways to make it succeed. So if we have to elicit the help from someone else to do that, then, we would be negligent if we didn't do that, because we see what the solution can give us, but we need help to get there.
Definitely.
So I think that's a big thing with you, like when you asked with what could you tell people, that, that's a big part of it, is we know it can help, but get the help to help you get to that point. So we're doing it right. And then it will be successful.
Oh, perfect. So it's important to understand your capabilities internally and understand where you need help to make it successful. Yeah.
I think the other thing that's helped too is I was fortunate enough to be invited by Jim Lake to be a part of a group called the Early Adopters. So that group has been phenomenal, because not only do I get to talk to the team at Morse on a frequent basis, but I get to talk to the early adopters who are using the system all over the country. So it's not just what is Morse doing and what is Penobscot doing. I'm getting to hear what agencies far bigger than us are doing, what they're implementing, what their call flows are like. I get to see all that. So find a group of people to work with is huge. So get involved in that group, in the early adopters group, because the amount of knowledge and resources that they've provided me has just been phenomenal.
So networking with industry peers.
Absolutely.
Like-minded individuals.
Right.
On what other innovative solutions you could implement. Okay. I like that. Any other outcomes that you've seen so far? The solution is relatively young. You just went live about 6 months ago, but is there anything else that you want to make others aware of beyond what we've already talked about today?
Just be patient.
Patient. I like that.
Patience.
That's key.
Because, like we've said, there's a lot of reasons why this isn't an overnight fix. But having the patience and knowing that over time it'll pay off. I think that's one of the big things. Like we know, because we get that little glimpse of it working, and then you want to add more and add more and add more. But then you get to the point where you don't want to rush it, because it's working right. Let's not break it. So I think that's where that patience comes in, is knowing that, we're going to get there, but we just, let's take it methodical so we're doing it right.
Takes time.
Yeah. Well, definitely.
Yeah, it takes time, especially, like we said earlier, this is new to this job. So coming up with innovative ways to make the lives of our people a little bit easier is not easy. So be patient and trust the system too, right? Because that was one of my biggest fears when we started, was that this wasn't going to work. And I learned very quick to trust the system.
And that's why it's even more important to have people like you, Chris, like you, Brad, who have been through it, and you see that it works. As long as you stay patient, continue to improve it, you're going to see beneficial outcomes. And so people who might have some reservations can talk to people like you, and you can tell them, no, this is going to work. It's going to be great, but you got to stick with it. Someone has to take the plunge first.
Right.
Yeah.
Glad you guys did.
No, we're happy to do it.
Yeah.
I think that if we can have a positive impact on the industry, then we've done our jobs.
I think you certainly have, and you're going to continue to have an even more positive impact on the industry, on your community. And this may sound hyperbolic, I don't think it is, on the entire country. Think about, like we were talking about earlier, in 5 to 10 years, if 50%, 60, 70, 90% of PSAPs across the country are using this, that will dramatically improve non-emergency outcomes, for Americans all across the country. Millions of Americans will benefit from this. Lives will be saved, lives will be improved, and we need somebody to start. We need the pioneers. And then, like you said, people in this industry talk, and they're copycats, to use your term from earlier, Brad. So once they see it's working for you, they're going to implement it as well at a time where we really need it. So if I could summarize, this isn't just about, cost savings or improving efficiency internally at Penobscot County, but it is really about improving the lives of tens of millions of Americans.
It's about improving the service.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I mean, we could sit here all day. And I could go, if I'm on the phone with you taking a barking dog complaint and my 911 phone rings, now I'm going to tell you, excuse me, sir, can you please hold on while I go take a 911 call? Meanwhile, that person that's dialing 911 is still sitting there with the phone ringing. It's that simple.
Yeah. You've seen it countless times,
like
probably.
I said, I've been doing this job for 16 years, and I can remember countless times where I was taking a non-emergency call and put them on hold multiple times to either handle a 911 call or an emergency radio traffic from, a police officer or a fire engine, or, well, what kind of service are you giving that non-emergency call? Right. But, we're in the, job to deal with emergencies. And yes, customer service is important and we have to prioritize. But that person that's calling for the non-emergency call just thinks, oh my God, they just keep putting me on hold. Right. Not realizing everything else that we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, as they start to get that a little bit of better service because they get their information quicker, like we talked about earlier, it's going to change, and you will see, you'll see an increase in use, I think.
Well, good. I think so too. I totally agree with that. Lives will be improved all around. So I love it. And it's very interesting hearing about what goes on behind the scenes too. The everyday person who's calling for, I lost my cat, or where are the fireworks this week, really don't understand everything that goes on behind the scenes and how difficult it is. They're just focused on the one issue that they have. They don't know that maybe you're helping somebody in a life or death situation on the other line, and that's why they're waiting, right?
The general public has no idea what happens
Exactly.
inside that dispatch center every single day.
Exactly. So one of the common themes we've been talking about in this conversation is public perception and getting the right message out to the public to convey why you're doing what you're doing. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Once people understand, hey, wouldn't you, if you're in a true emergency, wouldn't you want somebody to pick up the phone right away and be able to help you? Of course. Well, this is how we make that happen for you. When you have a non-emergency call, you might talk to our IVR bot, but guess what? In that situation, you're also going to get help right away and probably get a resolution in 15 seconds, 30 seconds, making it very easy for you. So I think it's great what you guys are doing. I'm really honored to have you as a customer because I never thought about public safety in this way before. And when we first started talking, truthfully, it was just about, another Amazon Connect deployment. But now I'm really looking into it and I'm starting to understand, whoa, this is really helping people.
Yeah, 100%.
Really improving public safety.
Well, I think that's one thing that, we can probably say that Morris probably learned some things from us.
I bet.
From, not realizing how some of the call flows and stuff work in public safety because they've never dealt with it before. So I think we can all help each other because we're all going to learn, new things, from each other for this process because it is different. I mean, public safety call taking is completely different than, any other customer service call taking, because we have certain protocols and everything else that we deal with, and we deal with, such a wide variety of agencies, police, fire, EMS, that require different information for different call types. And there's just so much. So I think when when they started seeing some of that, it changed, some of the thinking too on how we wrote some of our paths and things like that. So I think that as it grows more and we all get exposed to what this can do for us, it'll just keep improving.
Sky's the limit. And look at that. We're learning from you. You're learning from us. It's a win-win. I love it. So anything else, guys, before we wrap up here?
I think that's it.
I think that's it. Well, again, I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to do this, and really looking forward to continuing to improve your solution and help the people of Penobscot, Maine even more.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Good?